Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I'm so happy to be here today and really excited to be talking about thought leadership today. What I love about this topic in particular is that oftentimes when I talk to leaders and people who don't even identify yet as leaders about thought leadership, that they start to see themselves reflected in different ways and see where they could maybe step into owning a thought leader as part of their identity, where they maybe didn't previously think they were qualified to own that title. So I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation that you feel more qualified to own your space as a thought leader, because you'll have some tools to really see how you can embody thought leadership as a skill set, but also how you can see that there's a lot of misnomers around thought leadership, and especially for women leaders, we hold ourselves back from really embracing some core parts of who we are that we could be stepping into more fully and giving ourselves a bit of a bigger stage in order to show up as thought leaders in ways that are aligned with who we currently are, skill sets that we currently have, messages that we're currently already broadcasting, belief systems and values that we want to share, and ways that we really already have the capacity to have impact, and we're not just fully owning, embracing, honoring, and stepping into. So let's dig into this. We're going to talk about the myths and realities of thought leadership today, what thought leadership is, what it isn't, how leaders at any level can build credibility, visibility, authority, and influence in ethical ways. I always have to put that in there. In ethical ways, we're not trying to brainwash people without feeling like they have to be the smartest person in the room or the person who knows the most about something in the room. That's where we often get in our ways, is we think, well, there's other people that know more about something than me, so I can't possibly be a thought leader. And that's just not true. And we're going to get to some of that ego stuff in a little bit. So we're going to talk about some of the misnomers around thinking that we have to have a certain level of, popularity or influence or a certain number of followers on social media and these kinds of things before we can really own our voice in a big way and build a platform around it. Owning your voice doesn't require that you already have an audience. And so let's start with that. Today, we're going to be really digging into what makes someone a thought leader, and then how do you know if you already are one or if you already have that capacity kind of built into things that you're already doing. So let's start with the definition of thought leadership. A thought leader is someone who shares ideas that shape, shift, or expand how others think, act, or lead. So those are really important verbs in there. So let me say that again. A thought leader is someone who shares ideas that shape, shift, or expand how other people think, act, or lead. So it really is around creating a space to share ideas that influence people in a certain way that when they come away from an interaction with you, they have an idea or a perspective that has evolved or grown or shifted or changed, and they're going to go do something with that. Now that they see something different, they want to go do something different. I love the idea of, in the work that I do, going into a room and thinking, I'm going to share information with people today. And once they know this information, they can't unknow it. And so they're going to carry this information forward in a way that they behave differently because of what they learned in here. That's thought leadership, that people leave a space or an interaction with you and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't unknow that thing. Whatever was just said or whatever I just experienced was profound in a way that I now see things through a different light or through a brighter light or through a more visible lens. And I'm now going to show up differently in the world. And we all have the capacity to influence people in that way, based on things that we know a lot about, based on our personal experiences. It's going to come from having rich, deeply personal experiences that we share with the world. It doesn't have to come from being like a subject matter expert in an area of expertise that other people don't know anything about. It can come from very many different layers of our lived experiences, different layers of education, different layers of professional experiences. It can come from a lot of different places. So what are some of the key traits? Let's talk about 4 key traits in thought leadership. So the first is that thought leaders have a clarity around ideas, or a clarity of ideas. This means that thought leaders are really clear about their knowledge and beliefs, and they're confident about their depth of knowledge. So thought leaders don't necessarily think they know everything about a certain topic or the thing that they tend to talk most about. They don't need to know everything or think that they need to know everything about something. They think that they realize that they just need to know enough about something to shape, shift, or expand how other people think, act, or lead, right? So I don't need to know everything about a topic. I just need to know enough about it to help shape other people's perspective in a way that changes how they engage. So for me, let's talk about imposter syndrome. This is something I've been talking a lot about in corporate work recently, especially in working with groups of women in corporate spaces. So I talk about imposter syndrome in a way that shifts the way that women see how their own imposter syndrome has impacted their lives. And they also see the root of their own imposter syndrome in a different way. When we get done talking about this, when I get done leading a training on this topic, women have a different perspective on imposter syndrome, and therefore they then go out and they engage differently in their personal and professional lives based on what they just learned during our time together. Now, I know a decent amount about imposter syndrome. I don't know everything about it. There are people and academics who've studied decades and decades and done tons of research on this. I've taken some cross sections of information, personal experiences, and work that I've done organizationally and work that I've done with groups of women over 20 plus years. I've read studies on it. I've done a lot of reading on it, but I certainly only know probably a fairly small percentage of all the things on imposter syndrome. That said, I have a very unique perspective on imposter syndrome in terms of where I think it comes from, where I think it's rooted, how it's rooted in women's conditioning, how that conditioning impacts us over the course of multiple developmental stages in our life, and then how that impacts how we show up in the world, how that impacts our internal dialogue, which then impacts our external dialogue. So I have a clear sense of this within a framework that I'm very comfortable and confident sharing in a certain way that I know shifts how people think about this and then shifts how they behave in certain environments once they know the information that I've shared. So that clarity of the idea, that's the first thing in thought leadership and the first trait that a thought leader has is a clarity around ideas. I don't need to know everything, but I know enough about something that I can create or impact someone else's perspective on this. The second trait of a thought leader is consistency of voice. And so thought leaders are consistent about what they talk about and how they talk about that thing. That doesn't mean they only talk about one thing. Maybe you're a thought leader in a variety of different content areas, or maybe there's kind of an umbrella that overarches all of it. But there's certain things that you talk about consistently, and you have some level of notoriety around it. Now, notoriety does not mean that you have like the largest LinkedIn or Instagram following, but it means that people know that you have some expertise around this. The people that know that might only be the 5 people that sit around you at work. That's fine. That's notoriety. So who are the people that know and see this consistency about you? Is it the 5 people on your team? Is it the 500 people in your organization? Or is it maybe 500,000 people on a social media platform? It can be any of those things. This consistency of voice is also part of that person, a thought leader's personal and professional brand. And so they are known for this through and through in terms of how they show up in professional spaces, often in personal spaces. There's a through line. So that consistency of voice is that they're known for this and they have some history of being known for this. And they're consistent in terms of continuing to show up and talk about that thing. It's not like a one-time thing. I'm not talking about one thing one time and then being a thought leader on it. The next trait is that thought leaders are courageous in sharing their perspective. And so they are courageous in sharing their perspective, oftentimes unpopular opinions, oftentimes ideas that maybe aren't mainstream or aren't mainstream yet. And in that courage in sharing their perspectives, they are typically bold, unflinching, and committed to the message. And so they believe in what they're talking about to the point that they don't believe that everyone else needs to think the same thing as them. In fact, they're more than happy to go and engage in conversations to help enlighten other people to see their point of view. They have their courage to share their perspective in places where maybe their knowledge is not common knowledge, or maybe there's an opposing viewpoint and they want to go in and share their viewpoint. So that courage to share their perspective is one of those traits where that shows up over and over again, the courage to talk about this thing in lots of different contexts and situations. And then the fourth trait of a thought leader is they're focused on impact, not just visibility. So thought leaders are not just in it for the notoriety or for the like shiny lights and like, now I have more followers because I talked about this thing. we're really in it for the service element of it, that impact where we can see ripples over time, where we can see that I created a shift in perspective that impacted someone else. And then they went and did something with that impacted the people around them, and so on and so forth. So there's this like repetitive cycle and ripples that extend far beyond the thought leader themselves. So they understand the power that they have to transform other people's beliefs and actions and ideas. And they take that responsibility really seriously and also hopefully very ethically and really work within ethical guidelines and boundaries in terms of understanding the impact that they want to have and understanding the impact that their work can have. So I didn't know that I wasn't ever like striving to be a thought leader. And I really didn't think about it until some things started happening and across different industries that I've worked in, where people would come up to me and reflect the impact of my work on them. So they would come up and say, hey, you said this thing, and then I went and did this thing, and here's what happened. And that started happening this has happened to me in multiple industries, but it started happening probably 15 years ago, maybe longer, but consistently in different spaces that I was in, where I was recognizing, oh, wow, when I share things, people go take action based on what I've shared, and they can see how that action impacted them in a new positive way. And then they come back and tell me. And that feels really exciting and really rewarding. I saw the power that I had to influence and have impact and ongoing ripples of impact. So I could see kind of these ripples and layers of influence in the ways that my work really started to extend beyond me to other people's experiences and how they shared their learning that I gave them with the world. I also found that I wanted to talk endlessly about certain things. So this is the other thing about thought leadership, is there's usually some things as thought leaders that like we could talk about forever and ever and ever and learn about forever and ever and ever. And we would never get bored. And we would do it even if we weren't getting paid for it, because it's just stuff that we're really, really invested in. We're really interested in or intrigued by. We're excited about the things that we talk about. So it's not just like, oh, I have to learn this and figure it out for work or for my current role. But thought leadership is really often goes a step beyond that into something where there's a lot of innate passion around it, or maybe learned passion around it, but investment in the knowledge and excitement about the learning process, in which we don't want to just stop our thought leadership at like, here's what I know now, but we're always wanting to learn more about the things and add to what we already know and continue to kind of grow and evolve the thoughts and the ideas and the beliefs that we're sharing with others, because that can then hopefully deepen and widen the impact that we're having with others as well. So when I think about how I've kind of evolved as a thought leader over time, it's really been in noticing how the ripples of impact in my work have been consistent, again, across industries. So when I was in the fitness industry, there were certain ways that I talked about things that I could tell were different than what other people were talking about. When I started talking about motherhood, and I had started my Shameless Mom Academy podcast, which I recorded episodes for 8 years on that, over up to 900 episodes. Can't even keep track of the numbers now. So 900 episodes of the Shameless Mom Academy podcast, talking specifically about the impact of motherhood on women's identities. To be able to talk about that for 900 episodes, that's like 900 hours, never mind the prep time behind the scenes of every episode, 900 hours, 9 years of work. That's a massive body of work that, whether or not you want to break it down by how much I got paid for that over time, that was something I was deeply committed to and wanted to learn endlessly about and talk endlessly about. When I look at other through lines, whether it was in my fitness career, whether it was in some of my early work where I worked in psych, whether it was in the work that I did with moms, a through line of feminism and the social conditioning of women has been another area of thought leadership for me. So I can talk endlessly about feminism and the social conditioning of women. I'm very intrigued by this. I'm very intrigued by how this impacts the way women show up in the workplace, how it impacts how we show up in relationships, how it impacts how we show up in parenting, all the things. And with that, being able to talk about women and voice and visibility and taking up space physically and figuratively, in talking about the policing of women's bodies as it relates to diet culture or reproductive rights. These are all things that I could just talk about forever, even if I wasn't getting paid for it. I could learn about forever, even if it didn't relate to my career. Leadership is another one, being able to talk about what makes a great leader, how leaders can have the deepest and widest impact, how to build a personal values-driven leadership brand. So this is more of a newer topic of thought leadership for me, but one that I love learning about, love talking about. And every time I talk with groups of people, especially women, about building a personal leadership brand in their workplace, in their profession, I get so excited by what's reflected back to me. And I can tell like light bulb moments are happening. There's lots of ahas. And I can see that then those leaders go and engage in leadership in a different way. And the people who they lead are impacted in new ways and positive ways. And those are the ripples that tell me this is working. This is the area that I want to keep growing and investing my time in, because I'm having great impact here. Okay, so those are the traits of thought leadership, and those are how I could see some of my different, how I could see my different capacities as a thought leader over time. I want to talk a little bit about myths of thought leadership, which I've addressed a few already, but let's just dig into dig in and get dirty around the myths, because this is where we hold ourselves back. When we believe myths to be true, then we disqualify ourselves. So the first myth is that you need some sort of huge platform to be a thought leader. If I don't already have the following of Brene Brown, why even try? Or if, Oprah already said it, why should I bother saying it more? So you don't need to have a huge platform at all. So that's myth number one. You can start at any time from anywhere with your thought leadership. Number two is that you have to have some sort of like published book or PhD or body of work or like something really tangible to prove that like, look, I made this thing, therefore I'm a thought leader. No, you don't. You have to have a unique perspective. You have to know what you know and know that you know enough about that thing that you can impact other people, but you don't have to have a book written already on the thing. You don't have to have a PhD in the topic or content area. Number three is that the number three myth is that you need to perfect your content before sharing it, that you need to like have something that's like really polished and in a framework. You absolutely do not. I've built plenty of frameworks over time, but when I have started as a thought leader in any content area that I've become a thought leader in, I just started talking about my perspectives in a way that was fun and interesting to me. Because when something's fun or interesting to me, I can talk about it with passion in a way that engages other people and helps them start to shift their thinking. From there, I can start to build frameworks based on the feedback I'm getting from people. But you don't have to have something perfectly structured or perfectly outlined or in a perfect framework or academic paper before you share it. You don't have to have perfect social media images. Nothing needs to be perfected, because the thought leadership it's what you think and know. So it's already perfect as it is. The fourth myth is that thought leadership is about self-promotion instead of service. And so when we think about thought leadership as self-promotion, we can all think of people who like self-promote and it's exhausting to be around. That's not thought leadership. Great thought leaders have very magnetic energy. And so when they're talking about the thing that they are passionate about, you want to know more from them. And they're not self-promoting. They're not talking about themselves. They're not centering themselves. They're talking about the subject at hand. They're talking about how they can center you as in relationship to the subject at hand, why the subject at hand is meaningful and impactful to you, what you can do with this information. So they're not self-centering. They are of service. So they're service-centered, not self-promotion or self-centered in how they're going about things. So the great thing about that is for people who think like, well, I don't want to be a thought leader because I don't want to have to like sell myself all the time or promote myself all the time. You're not promoting yourself all the time. You're promoting your ideas in a way that centers others and that centers how other people can take what you know and apply it in a way that is deeply impactful to them. And that's what the service piece is all about. So thinking through thought leadership as a contribution and service, not about perfection, not about ego, and not about being super polished. I want to talk about the ego piece just a little bit when it comes to myths, because when we think about thought leadership, I think we can all think of examples of male thought leadership where there's this overconfidence that is exuded. And women are typically males are conditioned to be overconfident and women are conditioned to be underconfident. So when we think about male thought leadership in males, oftentimes the ego component is someone being really loud, maybe even like verbally aggressive and like just over the top. And it maybe isn't magnetic energy. It maybe even to you might be repellent energy. And so for them in thought leadership, their way of checking their ego needs to be like, hey, how can you tone it down so that you're centering the people you're trying to impact rather than just centering yourself or trying to be more loud all the time? For women, checking their ego in thought leadership is how can you step back from being underconfident and being afraid of being too much or being an overconfident male and give yourself permission to take up enough space to really get your message out there. Women who are afraid of self-centering and self-promotion are generally demonstrating underconfidence, which is then holding them back from actually taking up the space that they need to take up in order to get the thing done. So for that female ego, it's often getting out of your way to be like, stop taking yourself so seriously. Stop thinking that people are going to be annoyed with you. Stop thinking that people are going to be like, oh my God, she's too loud. Who does she think she is? Getting over that piece of ego versus the male overconfident ego, which looks very, very different. So understanding what ego looks like for you, especially if you're carrying these, really generalized stereotypical gender roles. And then how do you manage that in order to step away from the myths of thought leadership? So what actually makes a thought leader? So let's talk about what actually makes someone a thought leader. And I want you to think about how these apply to you and things you might already be doing. So the first thing I've already mentioned is having a point of view and a unique, distinct point of view so that you have this perspective that other people recognize as yours. They know what you think about this thing. So this means that you are sharing what you think about something. You're sharing an idea or a concept with a lens that makes it personal to you. So sometimes that is a little controversial. Sometimes maybe it is an unpopular opinion or an unpopular idea about a topic. The second piece is generous sharing. So generosity, sharing your insights freely in order to help other people grow. That doesn't mean that you work for free, but it means that you're sharing your insights freely in order to be helpful and supportive to others. You're not trying to just like keep your information to yourself. Next is relevance. So being relevant with your information. There's topics that I have kind of put on the back burner at certain times because they're just not as timely as other things maybe that are coming up in a news cycle. And then there's times when I bring some of those things back. So actually imposter syndrome is one of them. There's been times where I've talked a lot about it. There's been times where other things have been more relevant. Maybe other components of feminism or other components of women in leadership. And then there's times where it comes back to the forefront and I'll bring it up again. So that relevance is speaking on things that are current in your industry, workplace, or community. And then being timely in that ability to bring those ideas to life when they're most relevant and supportive and needed in those spaces. Next is accessibility. So thought leaders are really great at making complex ideas simple enough that people can understand them and integrate them in ways that are meaningful. So again, making sure that people can take a complex idea and understand it and integrate it in a way that's impactful and meaningful. If I'm only sharing my knowledge in a way that's really, really either too deep in knowledge or so specific that only a small group of people can understand it, I still might be a thought leader, but only to a very narrow niche of people. Great thought leaders are really good at breaking down something complex into simplistic components so that people who don't have a PhD in this topic can understand, oh, that's what that means. And here's what I can do with this information. Here's how it applies to me. Here's something that I can do with it that's meaningful to me. And now I'm going to go do that thing and it's going to have impact. So that accessibility in terms of making the information that you're sharing accessible so that people can actually do something with it so that it becomes actionable and meaningful to them. Again, not centering you. You might love all the deep, research details and fine-tune language around this and really specialized language. But thought leadership is taking some of those specialized components and sharing them in a way that people who don't have the specialized language or don't need or care about this deep specialized stats around things and data can still use the information in a meaningful way. And then the other thing that makes someone a thought leader is credibility. So it's built over time by showing up consistently, that you are consistently talking about this thing, that you're consistently showing up in good faith as a leader, as a credible leader, as someone who is, there to help others get better, that you are consistently showing up in integrity, that you're consistently showing up in ways that are, again, centering the greater good, not just your own needs. So thinking through then, who are some of the thought leaders that walk among us? Because we think about Adam Grant, we think about Brené Brown, we think about, we just think about big names and people who have massive followings who've done really big, high profile work. Those are thought leaders, yes. And also there are so many other people. There are people that you are interacting with probably every single day that are fantastic thought leaders, and you just haven't seen them in that way. Or maybe the thought leader is you and you haven't seen yourself in that way. So a thought leader can be a woman leader in any organization who advocates for equity, or a thought leader can be one of your colleagues who is seeing something through in a different way and is really going to fight or advocate for doing things differently, or for using information in a new way, or for taking their perspective and being a change maker or a culture shifter or culture shaper because of what they know. A thought leader can be a small business owner who talks about how something that's happening right now in current events impacts everyone else and gives them tools to go get them through a hard time. So they're sharing their expertise, sharing their knowledge in a way that supports other people through a certain season. Oftentimes, especially with small business owners, this comes from having a little bit of wisdom and experience and being around the block a few times. And that comes in other professional spaces as well. But thought leadership can really come from kind of having that sage wisdom of like, I've been doing this for 2 or 3 decades. And so here's what I know about seasons like this. So we see that come a lot in seasons like we're in right now, where things get really hard, really heavy. Everything feels a little bit upside down, or a lot upside down. A thought leader can be someone who's inside a company who challenges the status quo, who challenges processes, or who challenges current culture and then inspires change or advocates for change or goes and creates change and is the person who's like, I'll lead the initiative. When I was thinking this through, I was thinking of this woman I've followed on LinkedIn for a couple of years now. Her name's Jelani Weaver, and I'll link to her in the show notes. And when I first started following her, she was working for a consulting firm here in Seattle, and she was talking about recruiting. She's a recruiter, so she was talking about recruiting in different ways, and just like, how you can like get the most out of applying for jobs, and how to be a great candidate and how to show up great for an interview. And everything she said was like really helpful with a little bit of a side of sass sometimes, and also always lending a giving hand and really consistently showing up. And so she started building this following. At one point, I got on a call with her. She said she wanted to start a podcast. I was like, hey, if you want to start a podcast, like, let's talk. I love what you're doing on LinkedIn. I would love to talk to you about what I've done with my show. So we got on the call, we talked, it was great. But she was like, just new starting out. She's like, I don't know who I think I am to start a podcast. And I was like, just go do the podcast, which she did. She now has over 350,000 followers on LinkedIn, and she is consistently putting out just incredible content. She's been recognized by Forbes. She's been recognized by all sorts of media outlets. She recently went to onto LinkedIn's campus and did a whole series with them, and was profiled by them and pedestaled by them, and got all sorts of recognition for just what she's done as a thought leader. And this is someone who works as a recruiter for an insurance company. Like, she's not working in the C-suite. She's not the founder. She's not the CEO. She's just a person who started talking about the things that she knows in a helpful way every single day. And it's been amazing to watch what's happened in just a couple years. So that's thought leadership. So you might already be a thought leader if people seek you out for your perspective, if your ideas spark discussion, if people come to you and they're like, oh my gosh, you said this thing and it impacted me in this certain way. If people ask you to mentor them or present on something specific, or ask you to weigh in on things, if you're asked to be on panels or speak on certain topics, or if people are quoting you or referencing your ideas and coming back to your work or your thoughts or opinions on a regular basis. So how can you step into thought leadership if you're not there yet and you want to be there, or if you're already in this space but you want to just grow in your capacity in this space and grow in your skills? So first is to start small by sharing insights, giving yourself permission to take up more space by sharing your beliefs and thinking through, how is my beliefs or my ideas, how are they just a little different than maybe the thing someone else just shared? So knowing what your differentiators are around certain things and then sharing those differentiators, sharing those differences in perspective. Identifying your zones of clarity, knowing what do you stand for? What are the conversations that you want to be shaping and being like really right in the middle of? What do you love learning and talking about so much that you would keep learning and talking about it all the time, indefinitely, endlessly, even if you weren't getting paid to do so? Start sharing your stories and your lessons learned, not just polished expertise. So being an incredible storyteller and being able to share lessons learned through stories is one of the top thought leadership skills. It's not always just about sharing knowledge, because people can get knowledge anywhere. The thing that will keep people coming back to you is your ability to tell a really great story that allows people to see themselves in a certain way, that inspires them to take action in a new way. Next is tracking your impact. So noticing when people come back to you and they share like, hey, this really impacted me in a certain way, to not just dismiss them and be like, oh, it wasn't a big deal, to recognize, oh, wait, when I share certain things or in a certain way, people really listen. It has an impact in a specific way. Noticing that, because then you can do more of that. But noticing that reflection, like really letting yourself envelop that ability to be impactful to other people. And then creating a specific strategic cadence of visibility. So it doesn't have to be like every single day you're going to wake up and be the best thought leader you can be, but recognizing how can you be putting yourself out there strategically and consistently so that people can see that notoriety that you're establishing, that they can see the credibility that you're building. So showing up regularly where your audience is, maybe that's through LinkedIn posts. Maybe it's at industry conferences and speaking opportunities and being on panels. Maybe it's at organizational events within your own organization, with whether that's quarterly events, whether that's annual, full company events. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's writing on Substack. Maybe it's writing in trade magazines or journal contributions. I have a couple clients in the last year who've started writing articles and contributing to different publications on a regular basis because of their subject matter expertise. And it's really amplified their ability to be seen as thought leaders in their industry and created some new, really fantastic professional opportunities for them. Maybe it's through board membership. And so getting on a board where you get to use your voice and your opinion and have impact in a certain way. So thinking through like, how am I creating visibility opportunities for myself as a thought leader rather than just waiting for people to come to me, because that really does build on itself over time. All right. So thought leadership, at the end of the day, it's less about titles and it's more about having the courage to influence. It's about showing up over and over. It's about making that decision to share your ideas consistently so that you can have those ripples and make a difference in terms of the impact that you're able to have over time. So I want you to start thinking for yourself, what conversations do you want to have to shape your organization or your industry or your team? What are the ways that you want to be a culture shifter and culture shaper in the spaces that you take up that matter most to you? And what is one small step that you can take this week to share your perspective? So one small step that you can take to share your perspective, and then notice the feedback that you get, and then try it again. Even if you didn't get any feedback, try it again, and you keep trying it. Okay. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that you share this out, especially share this out with people that you know have great messages to share and you can see them holding themselves back sometimes. These are the people that need to hear this episode. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a shameless leader, but also thank you for seeing yourself as a shameless thought leader, because I know you have the capacity to share a message that is worth sharing that can have massive impact in the world. I can't wait to be back with you next week. And until then, know that I am in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.